Hey guys, it's JoINrbs here with another Long War II class review. Today we're starting off on specialists by looking at specialists in the early game. What do they do, what don't they do, etc. Specialists in the early game are very complicated. Specialists in the mid game and late game are also very complicated. I think this is the most nuanced class in the game, even more so than Shinobis. And I'm gonna just try my best on this, okay? I'm gonna do my best. So in this series, I talk about alpha strike rating and breakdown rating, whether a soldier is good at killing enemies before they can act against XCOM, and whether a soldier is good at dealing with situations where enemies are attacking XCOM. And specialists, I think, are okay in the early game. I gave them a 6 out of 10 for alpha strikes and a 5 out of 10 for breakdowns. They're not remarkable for either of these two metrics, but neither of the metrics really capture what a specialist is uniquely good at, which is using the gremlin to hack objectives, which are a very large thing in the early game. And so even if the specialist is a weaker soldier than the other soldiers you're bringing on a mission, you'll still often want a specialist because of the value of hacking the objective, whether that's a crate, a workstation, a door of a jail cell, or a van. There are lots of situations where the gremlin gets to hack an objective and has a high chance to give you a good reward. So, yeah, specialists are complicated. We start out with one of the most powerful abilities in the entire game. I rated the specialist opening perk 5 out of 10 for alpha striking and 9 out of 10 for breakdowns. But honestly, it could be higher for alpha striking, because Haywire Protocol, this lets you mind control robots. You have to do a little bit of work for it. You have to raise your hack score considerably, and you may want to couple it with something which reduces the hack defense of the robots you're targeting, especially on Legend difficulty. I think the hacks are more difficult there. But this lets you mind control something. And mind control is a... Do I have to explain why mind control is good? Probably not. You also have Aid Protocol at Scotty, which is another one of the best abilities in the game. It only requires one action. It doesn't end your turn. So at Scotty, you already have a soldier who can use 2 of the best abilities in the game in the same turn. Aid Protocol gives you plus 20 defense on a target soldier, going up to 30 defense for a tier 3 gremlin. In my experience, I usually have tier 2 gremlins at the end of a campaign. I don't usually really get tier 3 ones for any reasonable amount of time, but tier 2 gremlins happen very early, so that's sort of what I'm using for the majority of any campaign, which means that it's giving plus 25 defense to a single target. It's typically very easy to identify which target is the most in danger. So throwing defense on that target that you want to defend is pretty straightforward. And with how AI prioritizes targeting, if a soldier is on low HP and you give them enough defense, the AI will actually often just completely stop attacking them and start prioritizing someone else. So it ends up being worth considerably more than just that 25 defense, because you go from the AI trying to kill that soldier to the AI not trying to kill the soldier at all, just dealing damage to somebody else's health pool, to a soldier who has tons of hit points and it doesn't matter, and you end up completely safe. 2 very, very strong abilities, plus the objective hacking is extremely strong from a strategic perspective. So we've started with a soldier who does 3 unique things, which are insanely good. The perk tree honestly doesn't have to do much for your specialist to come to every mission for the entire campaign, just about. Probably not the ones without hacking objectives always, but yeah, the perk tree doesn't have to be remarkable for specialists to be great. And in 1.3, 1.4, I think 1.3, Sentinel got added to Lance Corporal at the same time as, like, pods being sort of reduced in size overall. And so We now have a soldier who can overwatch twice in a turn, and potentially, like... Okay, the overwatch shots go off against 2 different enemies, that's a rule. So if a pod of 2 patrols into you on yellow alert, one of the greatest threats in the game, at least for me on Legend Iron Man, on lower difficulties, yellow alert action chances are lower, so it may not be as big a deal for you. But when I have a pod patrol into me on yellow alert, they often get really nice shots against my soldiers and deal a lot of damage or even kill someone. But if an enemy pod takes damage as they're patrolling in, they don't get to take yellow alert actions. They'll take green alert actions instead, which means they're just going to overwatch or hunker down or something like that. And so Sentinel both increases your damage output, and it defends you against yellow alert actions. And it's a Lance Corporal perk. For the rest of the entire campaign, you're going to be twice as good at overwatching, essentially. It does happen on occasion that there's only one enemy to shoot at on Overwatch, in which case you're not getting twice as good at Overwatch out of Sentinel, but it's rare. It's normal, in my opinion, that you end up being twice as good at Overwatch with Sentinel. And so, before 1.3, Revival Protocol and Combat Protocol were some of the standout perks on the Specialist tree, because the Specialist tree just wasn't really that good. And they're okay perks. I rated Revival 3 out of 10 for Alpha, 7 out of 10 for Breakdowns. It's your go-to whenever you need a soldier back in action. And it has value on Alpha Strike turns, because if like your assault is stunned, you can trade 1 action from the Specialist to get an assault back who can actually kill things. It's valuable in Breakdowns, very, very much so, to defend soldiers who are in trouble and need to be rescued. But I've generally found that I can do without Revival Protocol in my campaigns no problem, and I was even sometimes not picking it back in 1.0, 1.1, 1.2, where it wasn't really up against as strong competition, like just by being proactive about preventing these situations coming up. That's a difficult thing to do, and certainly Revival Protocol helps you out when things go poorly, so I understand being very attached to that perk. Yeah, I get that. And Combat Protocol, I mean, I've never thought that Combat Protocol is that good. I think that Combat Protocol is a glorified frag grenade, honestly. You can just equip frag grenades that do what Combat Protocol does, and then it does scale a little bit in damage as the campaign goes on, but the value of other actions just go so far up that it doesn't really matter. I mean, you stop equipping frag grenades as the campaign goes on, so yeah, Combat Protocol would have to scale up to still be relevant, and it scales up enough to sort of be okay, but it isn't incredible. I gave this a 5 out of 10 for Alpha, 5 out of 10 for Breakdowns. It's nice to have very reliable damage, and Combat Protocol, you know, is alright. But Sentinel is on another level. You have to understand that this is a multi-shot perk. It's a multi-shot perk influencing one of the most important like structures in the game, the Overwatch turn. And you get it at Lance Corporal. That's... it's just... yeah, this is... if you have a Specialist with 55 aim, I can understand, like, taking Combat Protocol there. I can't really understand taking Revival Protocol, because I think Revival Protocol scales better into later on in the campaign. But I'm going to hate that for like ever. Sentinel is very, very, very good. Okay, so we're taking Sentinel at Lance Corporal, and we don't get Combat Protocol or Revival Protocol on Specialists anymore in 1.3, 1.4, and for the foreseeable future. So that changes how the class feels a little bit. It has fewer like cooldown actions or consumable actions, and it has more positioning and overwatching. It ends up building sort of like an Overwatch soldier. At Corporal, we have the option to take Covering Fire, which I have, you know, on the Ranger tree, I dismissed it as one of the least exciting perks in the game, and I feel the same about it at Corporal. Covering Fire has some nice convenience interactions, like you can run next to something and go on covering fire Overwatch, and if it runs away from you, it will die from the Overwatch, and if it stands there and tries to shoot you, it will also die from the Overwatch. I think that is just a convenience thing. I don't think it's actually very useful. It may be more useful to you, like, in your first 1,000 hours of playing Long War II than it is in your second 1,000 hours of playing Long War II. Because at some point you just understand what an enemy is going to do when you do a certain thing. And if you can run next to something and know that it will run away from you and your Overwatch shot will kill it, then, you know, that's cool and go do it. But if it won't, and it will just stand there and shoot you, then you probably already know in advance. Like, Mutons are going to do that. They don't respect you flanking them at all. So I just don't do that to Mutons. Problem solved. Covering fire in general sort of reduces the strength of your Overwatches because it makes them go off against enemies who are in cover taking actions against you. Specialists, while I would implore you to build them out of high aim soldiers because there's no other class that gets 2 Overwatch shots until Rangers do it Gunnery Sergeant. It's really a big deal. While they can be built out of high aim soldiers, their aim doesn't scale incredibly, and they're not really good at shooting things which are in heavy cover or something. So I just don't value covering fire at all on this tree. I would rather not have that perk than have it on the soldier. If this level up were 3 covering fires, I'd be sort of upset about having to pick one of them. Interference cancels Overwatch on a targeted unit and can be used 3 times a battle, and this is again like a 1-action, non-turn ending gremlin ability. I'm 90% sure. It's been a while since I picked Interference. I think this ability is also terrible. I gave it a 1 out of 10, 1 out of 10. Just use lightning reflexes. Just use, you know, any ability which deals reliable damage to an enemy. All you have to do to cancel an Overwatch in this game is disorient the enemy, damage them, or run the Overwatch, and all 3 of those things can work pretty well with the, you know, running the Overwatch. You probably want to have lightning reflexes, but you can run an Overwatch without them too. So Interference would honestly be a little bit more exciting later on in the campaign, maybe. Except that you're going to want to alpha strike anything that you run into later on in the campaign anyway. Interference. Yeah. Field Surgeon, I honestly could have given 1 out of 10, 1 out of 10 too as well, because it doesn't do anything in mission, so this could have just been the level up where every perk was completely insignificant. But Field Surgeon does legitimately do something for your campaign, especially coming in at Corporal. What this does is at the end of a mission, any soldiers who are wounded, they have to like roll for their wound timer, and Field Surgeon gives them 1 hit point back before they roll. So if they only took 1 point of damage, they won't actually be wounded on the mission, and if they took more than that, they'll have on average reduced wound timer. So you do roll for a large range depending on how heavily you were wounded. So you might have a soldier who was wounded for 25% of their health who actually rolled a longer wound time than someone who was wounded for 50% of their health. And so you may not see the effects of Field Surgeon working in a way that really makes sense to you, but it does work, and it gets your soldiers back in action faster. And that has, you know, cascading effects on the campaign where you don't need quite as large a roster to run the same number of missions, which means that your experience gets condensed onto more important soldiers much more rapidly, and then you have higher level soldiers going on missions, you know, a month or 2 down the line, and they're killing enemies where other soldiers would have failed to kill them, which means you're not even taking wounds anymore, and the whole campaign can, you know, start to snowball into victory from there. So Field Surgeon at Corporal is very normal and the only thing I really consider. And at Sergeant, we have Medical Protocol, Scanning Protocol, and Trojan. I think this is another very interesting level up. Actually, well, I think that Lance Corporal is an interesting level up for what it's worth. I value Sentinel so highly that I would always pick it pretty much. I take Combat Protocol sometimes on low aim specialists. It's true, it's happened, and then I feel bad about it. Medical Protocol, Scanning Protocol, and Trojan are all very awkward abilities. Medical Protocol gives you a charge of a medkit that your gremlin can apply anywhere that it wants to go, and it lets, if you equip more medkits, it lets you sort of apply them remotely to things. And it's actually very nice to have. I think the meta in 1.4 is to go nanoscale vests rather than hazmat vests, probably, which means that being able to heal people and remove status effects like poison or burning is quite nice, because they won't have the hazmat vests to do that for them, most likely. And just in general, being able to top up somebody's health bar lets them act without dying, which is pretty cool. Medkits are one action, non-ending, so this is another thing that a specialist can do in a turn without preventing them from overwatching or mind controlling a robot, which are the two things that you probably want to end your turn with. Medical Protocol is a nice perk. I've definitely picked it. Scanning Protocol, I think, is quite nice if you utilize its value fully, but it's not the strongest perk in the game for sure. It gives the specialist like an extra 5 tiles or so of sight range effectively. It reveals hidden enemies like civilians who have not yet turned into faceless, or chrysalids who are borrowed. Also, of course, any enemies who are like behind a wall from the specialist, who the specialist can't see yet. Its like most straightforward use case is in stealth missions where you're trying to get to the objective without being seen. It can just make it much safer to advance across the map with like a specialist and shinobi pair. I haven't found those missions to be very important in the current iteration of Long War II, and generally when I do sort of cheese a mission in a stealthy way, it's just by using Oscar Mike plus command plus like a squatty assault with high mobility. You just like get close enough to the objective, hit Oscar Mike, command the assault, and hit run and gun on the assault and run 2/3 of the map to the objective and hack it, and you win the mission. That works on hack workstations and recover items, but doesn't work on recover data. They all look like the same mission, but recover data it doesn't work on, whereas recover item it looks like it wouldn't work on, but it does, and hack workstation it looks like it would work on, and it does. If that makes sense to you. So yeah, you can use Scanning Protocol to help with stealth missions, but I don't think in this iteration of the game it's very important. I've taken it before in iterations of the game where it was more important, and we'll see how the balance advances in the future, and you guys can be the judge at that point, unless I've made a new video series of whether Scanning Protocol is something that you need. I gave it 3 out of 10 for alpha striking. You can theoretically use it to free up your soldier movement and understand like which directions you need to be defensive in, so that could be nice. And 4 out of 10 for breakdowns. I don't know why I did that, but sure, okay. I mean, the same sort of idea applies, where it's useful to know where more enemies are coming in from, but I don't remember the last time I don't think I've ever used Scanning Protocol in a breakdown. Trojan, enemy units that are hacked take damage and lose their actions on the turn the hack end effects. This is a pretty nice ability. Both halves of that are very good. The enemy units will take quite a lot of damage from Trojan. It's enough to outright kill a drone, for example, and sometimes the damage gets buggy with it, and I don't understand exactly how it works, but it can like kill turrets outright and things like that too. And then enemies losing their actions on the turn after the hack effect ends is very nice as well. It effectively gives you another turn of the hack. Like if you're shutting an enemy down, all you were ever doing was making it lose its actions, and so the fact that they lose their actions on one more turn gives you an extra turn of the duration. I think this perk is very similar to Combat Protocol, because it turns your Haywire protocols that you have available at Squatty. This is like the mind control perk that I'm talking about. Haywire Protocol should be able to shut down drones and lower strength mechs pretty reliably throughout the entire campaign. So that's all that Combat Protocol could really ever aspire to kill. Yeah, it makes it just kill them, so you don't need another soldier to shoot them, which is like often just a convenience thing, but can be very nice. You can use Haywire Protocol from stealth, and as long as you succeed in the hack, you won't lose stealth. So if you're on a mission and you don't want to break concealment yet, it doesn't even have to be a stealth mission. You might just want to get to the objective and hack from there or whatever. Hacking a drone to shut it down will let you move past it, and then having Trojan on your specialist will also mean that it's dead once you do, so you don't have to worry about it later in the mission, which can be quite nice. Trojan is not like the most exciting perk on this tree, but I'm very happy to have it generally. It's just a nice little extra bit of output for the specialist. In a comparable way to combat protocol, it's obviously a little bit different. It's on a cooldown instead of being a consumable, and the damage gets applied in a somewhat different way and things like that. So that's the start of my specialist build. I basically took one of the 2 Overwatch perks, one of the 3 medic perks, and one of the 3 aggressive gremlin perks, I guess. So we're definitely a little bit spread out and scattered here on this tree, but these are not things that you need to... They're not things that you need to dedicate an entire soldier to have the soldier be good at them. There's no reason to dedicate an entire soldier to offensive gremlin actions. Like, who cares? You just need enough offensive gremlin actions to do something when you want an offensive gremlin action. Similarly, you don't really have to dedicate an entire soldier to Overwatch, because some of the Overwatch perks just aren't, good enough to be worth picking, or they're not existent on a skill level up. Like at Sergeant, there just isn't one to consider. And so you're always going to have some sort of hybridization in an Overwatch specialist. And then the medic perks, again, you don't really need to go all in on medic perks. You just want to like conveniently be able to heal one guy who's really heavily wounded. And you don't need to take the entire left side of the tree to do that. So, I really like specialists. Like I said at the start, I think a huge amount of their power comes from their squatty perks and their Lance Corporal perk. I think those are by far the most exciting things that we've gotten so far on this tree. And so specialists develop very interestingly. Getting high hack on them is very valuable. I certainly value enemy protocol as a hack reward highly. It's a plus 10 hack for your specialist for the rest of the campaign. It's usually a low % chance to succeed, but still worth attempting over a higher %, strategic layer reward or something like that, in my opinion. I also value getting the tier 2 gremlin quite early, quite highly. That's from a drone autopsy or breakdown or whatever. No, it's actually called Advent Robotics. That's right. But Advent Robotics is the drone autopsy, basically. You need some drone wrecks and you research it and you get to make tier 2 gremlins. So that's awesome. And then I also value skull mining out of the Proving Ground very highly. So after you have researched Skulljacks, you can research skull mining, and that makes it so that equipping a Skulljack on a soldier gives them plus 10 or 20 hack. I don't remember right now. It also lets the specialist have like a dashing melee attack, which will deal 20 damage to an Advent Trooper, which is very nice. It's sort of a no questions asked kill on any tier 2 or tier 1 Advent Trooper in the game. And you'll even, assuming you hit, it's a 70% success rate, you'll even get a chance to hack for like an intel cache or something like that, which has a strategic layer reward. So a lot of the specialist is happening away from the perk tree. You have the stuff that it does at Squatty, and then there are strategic layer things the specialist is very good at. Hope you guys enjoyed this review, and I will be back tomorrow. We'll be looking at mid-game specialist perks. I've been JoINrbs. So much for tuning in.